Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Life Stories, we retell those moments, honest every day, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. Savannah wears the evening like a secret. Gas lamps pool light on brick sidewalks, and the Spanish moss gives the oaks a soft, watchful posture. Inside an antebellum house rented for the rehearsal dinner, a quartet saws through something polite, while waiters ferry oysters over ice. I keep to the edge of the room with a water glass half hidden behind a spray of lilies, watching my son shake hands the way men practice in mirrors. Evan has on a tux that fits like certainty. Camille, all pearl and posture, glides at his side. Her father, Graham Ashworth, who never met a deed he didn't admire, hovers close enough to hear other people's answers. It's the kind of party that makes the city look expensive even to itself. The toast should have been harmless. A joke about first dates, a fond story about a tire blowout on I-16. But when the laughter thins, Camille's fingers tighten over Evan's sleeve. He clears his throat and looks straight at me, not drunk, not swaying, simply resolved in a way that comes from rehearsal. "Mom," he says, and the word lands like something overdue. "The best gift you can give us is to step out of the picture. Give us the house. Move on." It is quieter than a slap. People set down forks. Someone's phone lifts just a few inches, habit more than malice, but habit can wound. The violinist misplaces a note and pretends he didn't. I feel the glass chill my palm and think absurdly that the water is too cold for a May night. Camille smiles without showing teeth. "We'll take good care of it," she adds, as if kindness is a notarized promise. Palmetto House is a Greek revival with a porch that can hold 2 summers at once. Tom, my husband, built his company renovating places like that until we could afford one of our own. When he was dying, he slept downstairs so he could still hear the grandfather clock in the hall. Time is the only honest witness, he told me, and then he laughed because it sounded like something he might carve into a mantle. "If that's what you want," I say, now setting the glass on a linen-covered table, making sure there is no ring of water left behind. My voice is steady. People mistake steadiness for surrender. That's on them. I find my bag, slip on my shawl, and leave before the quartet can locate the melody again. Savannah's streets are damp from a quick shower. The oak branches lean low enough to bless my hair as I walk to the car. The house is 5 minutes away, 10 if you count every red light. I count them. At Palmetto House, I park beneath the balcony and turn the key the way Tom used to firm, decisive, no fiddling. The hall smells faintly of lemon oil and rain. The grandfather clock ticks a patient metronome. I reach out and rest my hand on its walnut case. I tell it because the living cannot hold all of our listening. The pendulum swings as if to say, keep time, not score. In the kitchen, I take down a spiral notebook from the high shelf, a cheap thing cardboard bent where it leans. On the first clean page, I write, "Tuition State University, 4 years." I write first apartment deposit Charleston. I write insurance when he missed a payment. Groceries when Camille's job fell through for a month. I write numbers not to punish myself, but to put air back into a room that someone tried to seal. It is astonishing the calm you can draw from ink. I open my laptop. The bank site asks for a password I still know in my hands. A month after Tom's hospice admission, we set up transfers to let Evan breathe. Each month they moved along like a tide. I find the line that does the moving and tell it to stop. A small box asks if I'm sure. I am. The clock ticks. I close the laptop. The phone on the wall is older than it looks. I dial a locksmith because I have a list in a drawer marked, "in case I ever need to." The man answers on the second ring, cheerful as an AM radio host. Midnight and all he says, but I can be there at 8. I make coffee that tastes like Resolve and leave a sticky note at the front door that says, "Back door 2." By 8, a white van sits in the gravel. The locksmith is younger than Evan and works like he was taught by someone patient. He shows me a set of heavy deadbolts, each one satisfying as a hand you can trust. He stands on the step to test the smart doorbell I ordered last winter and never installed. It chimes in a tone I don't like, too bright like a toy, and then flashes a thin red eye that makes me feel less alone. We sign papers on the hood of his van. He thanks me for the lemon cookies I baked last week and forgot to freeze. It rains again briefly, as if the city is blessing the new metal. I go room by room and open windows to the screen setting. Air moves, curtains lift their hems like debutantes learning to curtsy. In the study, Tom's leather chair still keeps the small in the back that he favored. I set the spiral notebook on the desk and underline the last number I wrote. There is nothing magic about math, but it refuses to lie for anyone, another honest witness. At noon, I walk the perimeter barefooted on hardwood we sanded ourselves. The rug in the front parlor bears the faint stain from that evening when Evan was 6 and knocked over a bottle of grape soda. He cried for an hour, convinced he'd ruined the house past repair. Tom told him there wasn't a spill a day couldn't quiet. He was right about that part, too. My phone pings a neighborhood app where people worry about trash cans and congratulate each other on tomatoes. A woman I know from nowhere asks if anyone else is concerned about the grand house on Jones Street, posting a photo taken from her car windows up. The comments bloom like mold left in the sun. She should downsize. These places belong to the city. No one says my name. It is somehow worse. I silence the phone and make tea. On the porch, the air smells of warm brick and wet fern. The doorbell blinks its small red promise. Across the street, a family carries a birthday cake from a car, candles lit even in daylight, because children want shimmer whenever it appears. Late afternoon eases in. I label a manila folder House Current and slide the spiral notebook inside. The front door has a new weight now. It opens and closes with an honest thud. When the light shifts gold against the hallway mirror, I hear the soft, tuneless hummed song Tom used to float through rooms. Habit is a lingering music. Or maybe it's the air vent catching. At dusk, the doorbell chimes. Not the bright toy sound. A flesh-and-bone finger pressed to it. The camera wakes red attentive. On the screen by the sideboard, a slim figure stands under the porch light. Camille is wearing a coat too thin for the hour, and a look that says she is used to being obeyed before she completes a verb. She pulls a key from her purse, bright brass, untroubled by use, and fits it to the lock. The deadbolt does not turn. She tries again, slower, as if politeness can persuade hardware. The doorbell's red ring holds steady. Something in her mouth tightens. From the corner of the frame, another hand appears with another key. She tests that one and the next, an entire bouquet of attempts jangling against steel. Inside the hall, the clock ticks, pendulum keeping private counsel. I don't move. I watch the screen the way a librarian watches the last reader leave patiently with an inventory already humming in her head. When she finally looks up into the tiny glass eye, her face more drawn than painted, the camera captures it all without opinion. The house records its own time. The rest I can write down. By morning, the porch is filmed with pollen and last night's damp, a thin yellow haze caught in the grain of the rail. The doorbell's app has stacked the night into tidy squares, Camille's face, then her keys, then the close-up of impatience you only see when someone believes a lock owes them courtesy. I scroll, save the clips, name the folder with today's date, and set the kettle on. The house moves the way it always has. The grandfather clock marks out its small certainties. The floorboards answer my steps with the same soft reply. I wash the 2 cups I didn't use and lay a towel over the rack so they dry in their own time. When the kettle sighs, I set the mug on a saucer and carry both into the front parlor. It is a small thing to put a saucer under heat, but small things keep order from slipping. A knock at 10 is the kind that belongs to a calendar, not a neighbor. When I open the door, Graham Ashworth fills the frame with winter tan and friendliness curated for closings. His suit is the color of another man's approval. He asks if this is a good time and walks in before the answer has room to breathe. He chooses the chair angled to the light, the better to lay out a leather folder. He glances around once mantel mirror oil portrait and arranges his mouth into appreciation. "Your Tom had an eye," he says, as if we are swapping compliments at a cotillion. Restoring a home like this is ministry in my book. I gesture to the coffee table and sit on the edge of the settee. The clock ticks. He opens the folder. "I think you'll find this clarifying," he says. "Housekeeping, really. Moss River Holdings acquired certain rights during your late husband's corporate restructuring. Consolidation is the nature of good stewardship." He slides a set of papers, forward articles, minutes, a transfer riding shotgun. There's a notary stamp from a county I've never needed, and a signature dressed in Tom's name. It wears his letters like borrowed clothes. Tom looped his B with a long tail that tucked under. This one stops short like someone afraid of curves. He dated ones with a laughable slash, the habit of a man who hammered nails with his whole shoulder. Here the date sits upright, obedient. I touch the paper as if it were over-warm, then lift it toward the window. "If this is housekeeping, I say I'll need a broom, I trust." Graham smiles wider. "Of course. We have teams for that. We're proposing a smooth transition, dignified public-facing. It's a blessing when legacy aligns with momentum." He says momentum like it's a tide he directs with his wristwatch. "Do I keep a copy?" I ask. He taps the folder. "I brought one for you." He assumes paper left in a room becomes part of the room. He assumes a lot of things. He stands as if we have concluded something. "My door's open, Marion. Let's not let sentiment jam good gears." At the threshold, he turns back for the practiced part. "You'll be proud of what we do here," he says. Outside, the street holds a patient hush, the kind the city reserves for noon. I set his papers on the entry table and wipe my hands on a dish towel I don't need. The deadbolt engages with its new sturdy sigh. By noon, Joni has let herself in through the kitchen the way she did as a teenager when she couldn't stand another minute of our father's silent dinners. She holds a canvas tote and the look of a woman who climbed more stairs than the bag forgave. "You're lucky I remember where you hide the spare," she says, setting the tote on the table. The cedar hits first a clean, resinous breath that smells like storage and caution. Joni lifts a small chest wrapped in a quilt square Tom's mother stitched. The lid fits so well the seam is a rumor. "Back of my hall closet," she says, "under a stack of shoe boxes labeled as if you owned that many shoes." She smiles, then flattens it. "Found it while looking for the blue cake stand. Please tell me you didn't loan it to Nora again." We ease the lid. Inside the careful arithmetic of a man who believed in keeping things that mattered, a folded letter in Tom's block print, a packet of photographs with rubber band pale as a nerve, a small metal tin the size of a soap. Joni opens the tin. An SD card blinks in, felt like a jewel labeled with Tom's square hand, Palmetto Mar. "He always pretended he couldn't work a remote," Joni says. "Liar." We carry the card and the letter to the study. Tom's chair gives a little when I sit the cushion shaped by his absent weight. I slide the card into the slot on the side of the laptop and let the file finder do its work. The screen arranges a single rectangle deposition T. I open it. Tom is thinner than any version I want to keep. Hospice gown replaced by the shirt he insisted on collar crooked, where he tried to get it right himself. A notary sits out of frame. I can hear her officious vowels, the murmur of a witness. Tom looks into the lens like he thinks it needs calming. He names himself, and the date names the house names me. He says the words competent and voluntary the way a builder says level and true, not to decorate but to certify. He speaks about the trust we executed when the doctor said the word we refused to learn to spell. Qualified personal residence trust. He says, reading off a page, then looks up to make sure the camera understands that the legal mouthful means this place belongs to me for as long as I live. He mentions a deed with a ladybird in it, smiles at the silliness of the name, then becomes precise again. Life estate. Remainder by my choice. He says not corporate twice and clears his throat like he wants to hammer the word into the studs. He lifts a folder into the frame, thumbs through so pages flash their stamps like badges. Joni presses fingers to her lips, then drops her hand to mine and leaves it there warm and ordinary, like a weight that steadies a napkin in a breeze. When the video ends, the house sounds louder for a moment, the clock, the vent, the gullible traffic. The letter is brief. Mar, he wrote. If you need this, it means my mouth isn't there to argue. I put the rest where you'll think to look when you're mad. Use what you must. Time will take care of the rest. I have never doubted your aim. The ink has bled only in the loop of his M. He always pushed too hard on the first letter. We sit with hands in our laps as if waiting for a hymn to settle. Joni wipes at her cheek, pretends she didn't. Nora should see this, she says, meaning Nora Ellis from Historic Homes, who knows where the bodies aren't buried in Savannah and which families call their lawyers by their first names. I call, and Nora arriving is less a visit than an incoming weather system, decisive, fragrant with rosemary. Her reading glasses on a chain like a weapon. She watches the video twice with her jaw set. When it ends, she keeps her eyes on the frozen frame of Tom's face and points at Graham's folder without looking at it. He's used this trick on porches from here to Wilmington, she says. Paper that looks like paper until the right light hits it. She smooths her skirt, fishes a card from her purse. Donovan Weaver. He's the only man I let explain my own bylaws to me. I expect a date next week. Instead, Nora thumbs her phone and puts him on speaker. Donovan's voice is unshowy and awake. 10 minutes later, I straighten a stack of magazines because the habit of tidying before company is hard to kill. He comes without a tie and with the air of someone who does not need one to be believed. He stands in the entry long enough to see the house, not just its parts, then asks for a flat surface. We show him the video first. He doesn't take notes. He watches. Twice. He asks to see the folder Graham left. He lays the transfer side by side with a copy of Tom's signature on a contractor's license we keep for no reason but remembering. He traces the tail of the B with the end of a capped pen. This wants to be your husband's hand, he says, not raising his voice. It isn't. I pour coffee while he reads the letter. The mugs sweat in the way of glazed stoneware. He sets the letter down like it can bruise and asks to see my ID. We both smile at the politeness of proving a person is who they've been in their own house for 30 years. He opens his briefcase and removes a one-page form I read from top to bottom without skipping because I learned to read so I wouldn't have to let anyone summarize. It grants him permission to collect records specific to what Graham is trying to build. It grants nothing else. I sign. He slides the paper into a folder marked with my name, not the house's. He does not promise outcomes. He asks where I keep copier paper. He makes scans, returns everything to where it was, and presses my hand the way a man does when he knows he is borrowing something heavy from you for a while. After he leaves, the day leans into its second light. I pack Graham's folder into a manila envelope and write Moss River in block letters across the tab. The SD card goes back in its tin, the tin into the cedar chest, the chest into a place that seems unimportant, which is the best place for it to live. Joni puts chicken and rice in my oven, as if carbohydrates can weigh a person to her chair. Nora wipes the porch table with the hem of a napkin, then pretends she didn't. By late afternoon, the neighborhood app pings again. A woman with a floral handle posts a photo of the Palmetto house porch and asks if the community has concerns about underuse. A wedding blog rounds up venues with a fresh post-ownership vibe, and my doorway sits in the middle of the collage like an invitation it never sent. In the comments, strangers discuss the fate of this address the way hobbyists speculate about hurricanes. I take the spiral from the study and write a new heading on a clean-page paper walls. Under it I write what paper can and cannot hold in my own shorthand signatures dates, heat breath. The house takes on the blue shade it prefers before lamps. In the hall the clock lifts its brass voice and counts the hour with the patience of a man who taught his son not to fear loud tools. The doorbell's red ring goes soft, alert, and unafraid. I close the notebook and rest my hand on its cover until the last tick folds into the next. The day after Graham's papers, the neighborhood app behaves like a flock that's found seed. Photos of my porch multiply, cropped close, tilted the way people shoot birds. Someone writes underutilized asset as if a home were a tractor. Another wonders whether a historic treasure might better serve weddings than widowhood. I mute the thread and it keeps talking anyway, a river I've stepped out of but can still hear. By late morning, a wedding blog posts a carousel. Bouquets staircases my doorway between them like a mouth that won't shape the word yes. In the comments, a new link blooms, a short, shaky video clipped to fit a phone. The caption reads, "When your mom admits she's basically an ATM, #boundaries." The clip is from a birthday dinner last fall at the gray tin ceiling. The sound of forks on ceramic, the cordial bustle of a place that knows what it is. I remember the night. I had pulled a checkbook because Evan's car had needed brakes, and he'd forgotten that bills come regardless of romance. On screen, you can hear Camille's voice say, bright as a wineglass. She's basically our ATM. The cut lands on my small laugh, the sort women learn when they grew up smoothing tablecloths while the men made pronouncements. The clip ends before the waiter sets down the cake. My phone hums in my hand with the comments heat. I call Joni. She answers from her car sun visor down the mirror, showing only her eyes. Breathe, she says, and the word reminds me my chest can still do what it was built to. I'll call Nora. Don't answer strangers. Don't answer friends either unless they're us. Nora arrives with the weather again. She watches once expression flat as a librarian's hush. Find the original, she says. The person who cut something knows what they're hiding. It turns out the original is in the pocket of a waitress who used to babysit for half the square. She'd filmed the birthday song because she liked Evan's embarrassed grin. She still had the file. She still remembered hearing Camille's line and seeing my face pass through 3 emotions in a single breath, surprise, then a choice, then that laugh I keep for children and men who want to be treated like them. We copy the full clip. The camera keeps rolling after cake. It hears me say, "We're not banks, dear. We're families." And it sees Camille roll her eyes with a smile that shows teeth this time. It hears Evan change the subject to football because the table needed somewhere else to look. We save the file in 3 places and write the waitress's name on a yellow sticky note large enough not to lose. Donovan watches both versions in the study. The edited one is the shape of accusation. The whole one is duller because truth often is. He doesn't say useful, he says keep that. He opens his notebook not to tell me what to do, but to record what exists. I'm getting calls, he adds without heat. Anonymous concerns about your capacity requests to appoint a steady hand to manage the property. It's the volume that matters, not the eloquence. He taps his pen once, a habit's metronome. Let's put a number on quiet. By afternoon, a man in a white coat without hospital on the pocket appears on a local blog, quoted as a physician concerned about cognitive decline in the elderly. He hasn't examined me, but he speaks confidently about patterns and risks. People in the comments write tragic, and for her own good. They add prayers folded like napkins over the appetite that brought them to the table. Donovan calls from his car. Can you be at Emory at 9 tomorrow? He doesn't push. He doesn't have to. I pack a sandwich because hospital cafeterias have learned to tax sorrow. The neuropsychology suite is painted the color of compromise. A woman with a badge that reads Lorena Park, PhD, shakes my hand without evaluating the shake. She lays out tasks like picnic plates, a grid of dots to connect lists of words, to recall later shapes, to draw the way you'd draw them if you'd never needed to. I trace a clock face and place the hands at 10 past 11, the time Tom always called my favorite because it looked like a smile. Dr. Park doesn't smile at that. She writes down the number and moves me gently to the next thing. Categorize these animals. Subtract 7 from 100. Name the months backward. It is school without bells, work without a paycheck. It is strangely kind. She asks how I manage bills. I tell her about the spiral notebook and the column that helps a mind calm its water. She asks who visits. I list names out of habit and make sure I include the neighbor who waves badly but always waves. By noon, it's done. She thanks me for the effort, a phrase that feels like a hand under the elbow. She says she'll write what she saw, not what anyone wants, and her mouth holds steady in a way that steadies mine. Donovan meets me in the lobby with coffee he claims isn't terrible. He doesn't ask how it went. He tells a story about getting lost in the hospital once and finding himself in a lecture about knees. We sit in a corner and let other people's appointments walk around us. Somewhere in the building, a machine insists on its beeping. No one argues with it. The next morning, a small man in a polo the color of regret knocks at my door. He introduces himself as Aaron Green from Forsyth Pharmacy and stands with his cap in his hands the way men used to stand at altars. "I owe you an apology," he says, before I can decide whether to offer him a chair. "Mr. Ashworth came by. He wanted me to sign something. Said you were picking up memory pills." He swallows like coffee went down wrong. "I didn't sign then." He came back. He said the word lawsuit. I signed. I couldn't sleep afterward. We sit at the kitchen table because confession must be fed, and I put both hands around my mug so he won't feel obliged to look at them. He pulls an envelope from his pocket. Inside is a typed page with his store's letterhead and the shaky certainty of a man who learned to tell the truth late. I retract my prior statement. It reads in the formal liturgy of correction. I signed under pressure. Mrs. Brooks has not filled any prescription of that class with us. Aaron signs again, this time in front of a notary. Nora will later materialize like an umbrella in rain. He slides the pen back across the table. "I'm sorry," he says, and his mouth is small in a way that makes me want to give him cookies. I do. He cries once quickly and wipes his nose with a napkin he tries to fold back into usability. When he leaves, he looks taller for no reason I can name. Donovan adds the affidavit to a folder with a spine so thick it looks like it should live on a shelf. He flips gently through what we have Tom's video deposition with notary seal like a coin, the deed with the bird, and the unsilly power of its claws. Dr. Park's evaluation when it arrives by secure email, clean and clipped and full of scores that mean my mind does what I ask it to. The original dinner clip with sound that doesn't care about hashtags. Aaron Green's correction, copies of my bank statements with the monthly transfers ending in a neat, satisfied line. He sets the forged transfer from Moss River next to Tom's contractor license and lets the comparison conduct its own class. Nora stands by the window, her glasses on top of her head like a second opinion. She watches the square across the way where tourists stop to read plaques they will misremember. "Cities have good memories," she says. "They just keep them in the wrong drawers." In the late afternoon, the doorbell rings in the tone I still don't like. A courier with a badge from the county hands me a thick envelope and asks me to sign somewhere he's already marked. Inside is a petition to appoint conservator formal as starched cloth, naming me as respondent, Evan as petitioner, Graham as concerned party, Camille as fiancé, the house as an asset requiring protection in the interest of family stability. There is a return date stamped in a red that looks like traffic, and an instruction sheet that assumes I have never met paper before. I read it at the hall table because the hall table was built for the weight of mail. Evan's name holds steady on the page. I think of him at 6 with grape soda on his shoes at 16 with a new driver's license he held like a passport at 26, saying we like a bridge between shores. I run my finger once under his signature, the way mothers do over kindergarten handwriting and mortgages alike. Joni comes in behind a storm and sets a bag of groceries on the floor without looking at me first. She sees the envelope. She doesn't touch it. Nora steps in after her, one hand on the door jamb the way women enter rooms where something heavy has already landed. We don't plan. We don't narrate. We do what the house has taught us. I find a manila folder and write court on the tab. Paper goes in. The deposition, the deed, the evaluation, the affidavit, the statements, the clips. Quiet things that don't need captions. I set the folder on the desk in Tom's study and place the spiral notebook beside it. The grandfather clock breathes its measured breath. Outside, a tourist trolley trills and moves on. Inside, the air holds steady the way air does when it knows it belongs. The courthouse on Bull Street wears its stone like a promise. Ceiling fans turn lazily over the security line, stirring a Monday out of humid air. Nora stands at my shoulder with a tote that could outfit a small office. Joni carries only lipstick and a stare that knows how to cut rope. Donovan meets us inside, jacket over his arm expression set to the quiet that travels well in rooms with flags. We take seats at the second row, wood smooth from decades of people reminding themselves to be still. A bailiff calls the case with the ceremony of someone who has watched more families rearrange themselves than any pastor in town. The judge, gray hair, pulled back, glasses low, gives the room a look that suggests she has very little patience for performances and just enough for pain. Counsel for the petitioner stands, navy suit, tie, neat as a sermon. He introduces himself, introduces concerns with a rhythm he's honed, arranges phrases like ongoing confusion, financial risk, family stability. He doesn't look at me until he says my name, and even then his eyes slide toward the house, as if the address were the true respondent. Graham sits behind him, posture erect, hands folded. Camille leans forward, a picture of attendance. Evan keeps his gaze low, the new haircut he got for photographs now making him look younger and more exposed. When he lifts his head, it's only to clock the exits. They call their first witness a neighbor with a tidy ponytail and a choir voice. She testifies to seeing me once at dusk in my garden without purpose, which is a strange phrase to put in a mouth. She gestures toward the air when she talks about danger, as if menace could be pointed to like a bird. Donovan declines to cross. Purpose is a poor nail to hang anything heavy on. Next, they call a physician whose lab coat has a name embroidered where a hospital ought to be. He's introduced as Dr. Colin Marbury, a consulting geriatrician. He speaks with the low hum of someone accustomed to being believed. He recites a list of common declines, then places me gently into them without particulars. Donovan rises, legal pad in one hand, pen capped. Dr. Marbury, when did you examine Mrs. Brooks? A half-beat pause, then I reviewed collateral information. Which is when you examined her on what date? I did not examine her personally. Did you administer any cognitive screening? No. Did you meet her? He adjusts his glasses. No. Did someone pay you to produce your opinion? That is typical in consulting work. Who paid you? He names an LLC that sounds like a shoreline. Donovan turns once toward the gallery. Graham's mouth compresses just enough to reveal that he too prefers particulars when they are his. No further questions, Donovan says, and sits. The judge's pencil has been working. She stops it now. They call Evan. He walks to the stand like a boy summoned from recess. The oath looks too big in his mouth. Counsel asks him about my bills, my memory, whether I repeat myself, whether I have trouble with technology. He answers softly, sometimes something like she writes things down a lot, which is accurate and meaningless outside a kitchen. I worry, he says at last, and the word feels honest because it is small. His hands shake when he folds them. Donovan's cross is a handful of steps, each polite. Mr. Brooks, did your mother pay your tuition? Yes. Your first apartment deposit? Yes. Is it true she keeps records? Yes. Is it true she set personal boundaries with you this month about money? After a beat, yes. And is it true you were present when your fiancé called your mother an ATM? A flush climbs Evan's neck, yes. No further questions. The petitioners rest on their stack of paper, thick and pale. The judge nods toward Donovan. Mr. Weaver, he doesn't stride. He collects a small stack and approaches the lectern, as if the lectern were a neighbor you must greet properly before asking for sugar. We'll start with what exists, he says, voice even. Dr. Lorena Park, neuropsychology. Dr. Park takes the stand. She does not dress like television. She lays out the tests she administered, the scores, the ranges, the points where people slip and don't know it. She answers each question cleanly, no garnish. In my opinion, she concludes Mrs. Brooks demonstrates intact attention, memory, executive function, and judgment, consistent with or above norms for her age. She doesn't glance toward me. She speaks to the judge as if to a colleague she respects and expects to refine her later. Opposing counsel tries a polite pinprick. Doctor, could stress affect her scores? Stress can affect performance. In Mrs. Brooks's case, her scores remain strong across domains. And would you recommend a conservator for a person with these scores? No. No further questions. Donovan calls Aaron Green. Aaron looks smaller behind the rail than he did at my table, and somehow firmer. He reads his affidavit into the record voice, catching only once. He says pressure and lawsuit, and I retract like someone touching a bruise to prove its healing. Opposing counsel attempts to quarrel with his memory. Aaron holds steady. I was wrong. I am correcting it. Nora takes the stand last among the civilians. She gives her name, her role with historic homes. The audits, she's overseen the budgets. She's balanced the grant applications. She has dragged across finish lines and neatly filed. Mrs. Brooks kept the special projects ledger last year, she says. I could hand that to a bank. She smiles briefly, not for herself. I did. When Donovan turns to documents, he lets the paper make its own sound. He submits Tom's contractor license as a baseline for signature. Then the Moss River transfer Graham delivered lined up like two students asked to read aloud. He walks the judge through the tails of letters. The pressure marks the dated slashes that look like a man who swings a hammer with his shoulder. One wants to be the other, he says softly. It isn't. Opposing counsel rises to object to the theatrics of handwriting. Donovan produces an email from the notary, whose seal sits on the Moss River page. She cannot produce a ledger entry for the date stamped, nor a copy of the journal she is required to keep. The judge asks a handful of questions herself. The answers narrow. Next, Donovan says, and nods toward the monitor. The full dinner clip fills the screen tin ceiling, the good clatter a candle that refuses to behave. Camille's voice lands bright and sharp. She's basically our ATM and the camera obliging, and without attitude refuses to cut before it hears my reply. We're not banks, dear. We're families. Evan shifts in his chair on the video. He changes the subject. In the gallery, the air changes flavor. Counsel objects to relevance. The judge overrules in a tone that suggests she is allowed to see context when someone invites her to take a stranger's temperature. Donovan breathes once, then nods again. The notary from the hospice appears in a corner of the screen for a moment to state her name and the date. Then Tom looks straight at the camera collar, crooked, because he refused to be dressed by anyone eyes thinner, but still the color of the river in shade. He gives his name mine. The house is the purpose of the recording. He reads the title of the trust he and I executed. He reads the deed that lets a bird carry a house forward only when its owner says. He repeats competent and voluntarily because he understands how rooms like this listen. He says not corporate twice like he's sinking a screw. When he lifts the folder into frame, stamps flash. He doesn't make a speech. He certifies. The judge watches without blinking. She makes a note only once. When the video ends, the air has that fragile quality of a church after a hymn that no one had to rehearse. Opposing counsel asks to voir dire the chain of custody. Donovan walks him through it, card to cedar box to study, to my laptop dates matching notary, attesting witness signature authenticating statement from the hospice director. The questions go thready. The answers do not. Donovan closes with only one more piece of paper, my bank statements with monthly transfers ending in a clean final line, and the receipt from the locksmith. He doesn't put a bow on anything. He stacks the papers in a way that suggests they can stand up without him. The judge leans back, palms pressed together, fingers steepled without piety. She reviews as she speaks. What the petitioners presented concerns without examination. A witness who saw dusk and called it danger. A document with a seal that can't be found. And what sits against it? Examination by a specialist. Sworn correction of a coerced statement. A deed and trust executed before any of this noise began. A video made when time was already short and used wisely. She removes her glasses, sets them on the bench, and looks directly at me. Mrs. Brooks, I find you competent to manage your estate. She turns to the petition. The request to appoint a conservator is denied. She turns a page. The court finds no credible evidence that the residence at issue is encumbered by the entity named in petitioner's exhibits. She pauses, a kind of mercy. That portion is dismissed. The gavel falls once. The room exhales. Paper is gathered on both sides like soldiers who have done all the marching they can. The bailiff calls the next case. People stand and sit against small tides within wood. We move to the hallway where voices are permitted to understand what happened. Joni hugs me hard at first, then softer when she remembers my ribs. Nora removes her glasses to polish nothing and ends up grinning at the floor. Donovan shakes my hand the way men do when something is finished and something else begins, because that is how days work. Across the hall, Camille says something to Evan that uses too many consonants. He listens with his face, then looks down at his shoes as if they were strangers. Graham straightens his jacket, smooths it, discovers it does not fix anything it was supposed to. Evan comes halfway toward me. He stops there as if the hallway had drawn a line in chalk. Mom, he says, and the word sounds like it learned something on the stand. He opens his mouth and closes it again. Camille's hand finds his sleeve. He doesn't shake it off. He also doesn't move. We're going home, Joni says, meaning Palmetto House, meaning lemon oil, and the clock that counts. We step into the bright square of afternoon and down the courthouse stairs, the stone a little warm under the soles. In the car, Nora fiddles with the radio until it finds a station that plays songs with actual bridges. The city passes outside the windows, squares, plaques, live oak arms reaching over the street like careful hands. At the house, the door accepts the key without argument. The hall smells faintly of rain that came while we were gone. I set the stamped order in a fresh folder labeled with today's date and slide it beside the spiral notebook on Tom's desk. The grandfather clock lifts its brass voice and counts the hour, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, each strike settling into wood the way water settles into a glass that's been steadied by a hand. Before the court's paper has cooled from the clerk's stamp, Donovan lays a new stack on Tom's desk, shorter, heavier. The logo at the top is a live oak, drawn in one confident line, Low Country Youth Literature Fund. A notary sits where the hospice nurse once sat, square shoulders, calm pen. Funds are already in escrow. The conservation easement rides on top like a copper roof recorded, filed the kind of promise that outlives all the mouths in the room. The easement says the facade is not for remaking, the rooms are for reading, and no developer can teach the house a cheaper language. I sign in the same hand that wrote Evan's spelling lists. The notary turns the book to me, points presses. Keys, front side carriage go into a linen pouch that once carried napkin rings. Donovan photographs what should be photographed, slides the folder into a briefcase that sounds like certainty when it shuts, and leaves for the recorder's office with a jog that makes him look younger than his shoes. The house is not empty afterward. It breathes like it always has, lemon oil, faint damp, the thin metallic satisfaction of new locks doing their one job well. I polish the glass of the grandfather clock with the corner of a dish towel and watch the second hand muscle its way past 12. In the kitchen, Joni rinses 2 bowls and sets them to dry as if they were staying. Nora stands in the hall reading the sunlight the way other people read minutes, then nods once to herself, a private benediction. News travels in Savannah by footsteps and photographs. By late afternoon, vans edge the curb, florists rentals a skinny boy with a soundboard on a dolly. Someone posted a rumor that the reception would be at the historic residence on Jones, and the rumor did what rumors do best, dress itself for evening and invite friends. Camille's people arrive in the kind of dresses that stiffen the air around them. The doorbell blinks its patient red. No one has a key that turns. I dress because there are rooms you enter in linen and rooms you enter in armor. The front hall is both. Navy dress, small earrings, flat shoes on wood, we sand it ourselves. The Low Country Fund's director meets me on the porch, a woman with ink on her fingers from opening boxes of new paperbacks. She has the deed under her arm and a smile she saved for children. Tonight it looks like resolve. Inside, the grandfather clock holds the air like a throat before a song. I place a thick envelope on its crown molding where the wood is wide enough to cradle Sunday's mail. No speech, no tapping of glass. The room fills itself. Faces turn when paper makes that small, important sound the sound ties make when men pull them tighter. Camille steps forward in a gown the color of a decision. "You can't be serious," she says, smiling, teeth bright enough to deny the sentence. Graham takes the envelope, skims. His tan drains in a way that would embarrass the sun. He flips to the easement, reads the clause that says no commercial events, public reading rooms, preservation covenant in perpetuity. The word perpetuity stops where it is and makes a home. Donovan appears beside the fireplace like someone who was invited to carry heavy boxes. He holds up a stamped page, the recorder's seal round and unarguable. "Filed this hour," he says to the room, and no one. The Low Country director adds, "We're grateful to receive stewardship. Children will be reading here by fall." Her voice tilts toward the stair as if she's already deciding which landing wants a shelf for picture books. Graham's mouth works around a word that sounds like fraud and dies against the seal in Donovan's hand. Camille's eyes spark and settle. She turns to Evan. "Fix this," she says too quickly for anyone outside the family to hear. The family inside the room hears. Evan studies the envelope as if words might behave differently if stared down long enough. He doesn't reach for it. Guests find their phones. The wedding blog's stringer takes 3 photos and decides 2 are enough. A florist who once stocked my porch with magnolia leaves carries her bucket back toward the door without making a sound. I step to the clock and lay my fingers on the carved rosette Tom loved, because the man who made it didn't repeat himself on the opposite side. Time is the only honest witness, he'd said, and if the line is engraved anywhere, it's in this room. The clock ticks, uninterested in being quoted. "We'll need you to leave now," the fund director says, courteous with an edge that doesn't cut so much as direct. She does not point to the door. She begins moving toward it herself, which is how doors work in houses that belong to the living. Guests obey in that relieved, shamed way people obey when the plot just resolved without them. Camille gathers silk with both hands so it won't touch the floor and finds her balance by reaching for nothing. Graham smooths a lapel, discovers fabric won't loosen what paper has fastened. Evan looks at me, not past me, eyes red at the rim, the way boys' eyes get after baseball when dust has made a case for itself. "Mom," he says. My name, but older. He opens his mouth, closes. It drops his gaze and leaves his sentence on the floor where it can wait without hurting anyone. When the last car door thumps and the street exhales, the house grows taller by an inch, the way buildings do when they stop being asked to pretend. I walk room to room and touch wood as if light were talkative. In the study, the spiral notebook waits beside the stamped order from the court, and the recorded deed a trinity of paper that has no patience for adjectives. I write one last heading, transfers beneath it completed, and set down the pen. The next morning, I give the Low Country director a ring of keys tied with blue ribbon. We stand in the hall and listen to children's noise that isn't there yet and somehow is. She tucks the keys into her bag and touches the clock the way you would touch a shoulder you mean to greet again soon. Nora cries efficiently. Joni kisses my cheek and says she'll bring the blue cake stand back because there will be cake wherever I go. The condo over on Park Avenue smells like plaster, and the paper band you slide off new towels. One tree outside the window hosts 3 birds that believe they own the morning. I set a small wind-up alarm on the kitchen shelf, a travel thing with a face too bright for its size, and let it tick. The sound is thinner than the grandfather clock's brass, but it answers the same way when asked what time it is now. I write a check to a group that sues men like Graham when they fish in old waters for easy catches. The envelope fits in the slot at the post office with the snug finality of something right-sized. Back home, if we can call any place that, for a while I arrange 5 hardcovers on the sill one Tom loved. One I read aloud to 4th graders. One Evan carried to bed until the spine learned his hand one. I never finished one, I mean to begin again. Mail comes in the afternoon catalogs. A circular, a letter in Evan's careful print, without a return address. Inside a single page that says, "I don't know how to face you. I'm sorry." No signature. He's always been shy with the end of things. I slide the page between 2 clean leaves of the spiral notebook and close it. Paper keeps quiet. Toward evening, I walk to Forsyth and back past families with kites and a boy practicing trombone beside a bench because air is free and neighbors forgiving. When I return, the condo has warmed to my footsteps. I turn the alarm's little key until it resists, set it on the shelf, and listen to the thin, stubborn tick lay itself into the room. Somewhere across town, in a hallway with higher ceilings, the grandfather clock is doing the same work for a different audience, counting out sentences and pages, and the kind of silence that lets words land. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.